Coming up,
How aggressive are you willing to be when making a left turn when there's no traffic light? How close are you willing to get to a cyclist?
Driverless cars at the moral crossroads.
We don't think of those as moral questions, but those are questions that have moral consequences.
should driverless cars be programmed to treat all human lives the same?
Or should they be programmed to protect their passengers above all else?
I've heard several very smart people say, just let the cars figure it out.
Here in my car, I feel safest of all. I can lock all my doors. It's the only way to live in cars.
You could probably make a lot of the problem go away with technology, but I don't think you can ever make it go away completely.
Our guest is Harvard psychologist Joshua Greene, author of Our Driverless Dilemma: When Should Your Car Be Willing to Kill You?
I think the biggest ethical question is actually how soon do we adopt?
Driverless cars at the moral crossroads, coming up on Philosophy Talk.
Will driverless cars someday make human drivers obsolete?
Would you be willing to trust your safety to an algorithm?
What if you knew that that algorithm just might decide to sacrifice your life to save the lives of others?
This is Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything.
Except your intelligence. I'm Ken Taylor.
And I'm Laura McGuire, sitting in for John Perry, who's taking a well-deserved break.
We're coming to you from Cubberley Auditorium on the Stanford campus.
Our thinking originates a stone's throw away at Philosopher's Corner. That's where Ken teaches philosophy, and I'm Director of Research for Philosophy Talk.
Welcome, everyone, to Philosophy Talk. So today, we're thinking about driverless cars at the moral crossroads.
Can humans text and drive? They drink and drive. They drive while they're half asleep. Give me a computer any day of the week over a human driver.
Oh, come on, Laura. I know you. I know something about your driving habits. You like to drive stick shifts, right?
Cool chicks drive sticks.
Well, yeah. So why do you like to drive stick shifts?
Because I like to be in control of the vehicle.
Of course. So why give that up and put a computer in charge? Come on.
Well, see, Ken, I'm a very good driver, but other drivers really suck. Did you know that a whopping 94% of all accidents are caused by human error?
Well, I know that's true, but it's mostly just a few bad apples. Just 15% of drivers cause 85% of all the accidents. So just get the bad apples off the road.
Yeah, but if you take the average driver causes 3 or 4 accidents, and they have 11 near misses for every accident in the course of their driving lifetime.
Okay. I can't deny that people suck at driving. Okay, but Laura, come on. At least people care. Computers don't care. They don't care about you. They don't care about me. They don't care about any of those people. They don't care.
Well, they won't care unless we program them to care, Ken.
Oh, yeah, program them to care. You mean like with actual emotions? Come on, would mechanical road rage be any better than the humankind?
Ken, don't be ridiculous. We're not going to program driverless cars to have emotions. All we need to do is to program them to drive as if human lives matter to them.
Oh, which lives? The lives of their passengers? The lives of passengers in other driverless cars? The lives of pedestrians? Which lives?
They should all matter equally.
Oh, come on, so you're saying all lives matter?
That is not how I put it.
Look. I don't know about you, but when I'm behind the wheel, my instinct for self-preservation kicks in. It kicks in big time. And when somebody I care about, like my son or my wife or even you, is in the driver's seat, I do my best to keep them safe. I'm focused on them and their safety, not on everybody else on the road.
What do you want, Ken? A medal? I mean, do you have a point?
Yes, I do have a point.
Good.
Imagine that you and your loved ones are passengers in a driverless car. A pedestrian suddenly jumps into its path. The car calculates. It can either harm the pedestrian or harm you. What should it do, Laura?
Look, Ken, this situation is rarely going to happen if we program these cars right. These cars are going to be constantly scanning the road for signs of trouble. They're going to have much better sensors than mere human perception, and their reaction times are going to be a lot faster than humans.
Yada, yada, yada. Rarely is not the same as never. So answer my question. Come on. Should an autonomous car sometimes be willing to sacrifice its passenger to save a pedestrian? What's your answer?
My answer is that really depends on what moral theory you program into it. For example, if you program it to be a utilitarian, then it will decide what to do based on a calculation of the greatest good for the greatest number of people. And if that's the moral theory it's using, then I'm sorry to say, but yes, this is the reality. Sometimes it's going to sacrifice its passenger to save a greater number of people. And I think that's a really good thing, Ken.
Still haven't answered my real question and ask again. Would you, Laura McGuire, trust your life to a utilitarian car programmed to treat you as just one human being among others with no special concern for your individual survival? Would you do it?
Ken, we do this all the time. Anytime you get into a taxi or a bus or an Uber, you're basically doing the same thing.
No, we don't. I mean, because whatever a human driver does or doesn't feel about you personally, I mean, they can hate you, love you, whatever. They still have that instinct for self-preservation. Now, I'll put it to you. If you knew up front that the cab driver had no instinct for self-preservation, you'd be a little hesitant to get into that cab, wouldn't you? Come on.
Sure, but I'm not suggesting that we program these driverless cars to be suicidal or, to treat their passengers as mere disposable cargo. That's not what I'm saying at all, Ken.
Maybe you're saying we should let people be able to choose the moral theory of their driverless cars, customize it.
Oh, like getting that stereo you always wanted, or I always wanted heated seats. You mean like that?
Yeah, that's good. You pay a little extra if you want the car to be just a little partial to you. You pay even more. Maybe you have to do this on the black market, I admit. You pay it even more if you wanted to drive like a ruthless getaway car for your bank robbery.
Come on, Ken. These cars are going to be regulated. They're not just going to be able to do whatever they want. This is the reality that we're going to have to confront sooner rather than later. And this is coming right around the corner. So this is a really important topic.
Yeah, and to help us get ready for the day when this thing comes, we sent our roving philosophical reporter, Liza Veal, to look at the present state of the art in driverless technology. She files this report.
Self-driving cars. Will they ever get here? They seem stuck in the receding future. Here's how we imagine them in 1939.
Safe distance between cars is maintained by automatic radio control. Curved sides assist the driver in keeping his car within the proper lane under all circumstances.
But today, in 2017, we've got the technology. And the technology is really good at following the rules of the road. The only problem? Humans are not.
We could have self-driving vehicles, but I think as a society, it's not really appropriate to say that nobody else can use the road except these cars.
Wendy Ju is one of the people trying to teach cars how to interact with human society. She heads up the Center for Design Research Lab at Stanford. And they basically have to figure out how exactly we, as drivers, passengers, pedestrians, read each other's minds, and then teach cars how to do the same.
And one of the things that we discover as we try to design things for more situations is how many crazy different situations there really are that people are able to manage with, just kind of a raised eyebrow that are pretty amazing and strange and weird and great.
The way these cars work is they know their path and what to expect based on 360-degree mapping of every street. Then the computer vision is just there to detect all the extra unpredictable moving stuff. Wendy Ju's lab consults with and is sponsored by a long list of auto manufacturers.
Renault, Bosch, Fiat Chrysler, Toyota and Ford, and Panasonic.
Pretty much every car company has had to start developing this technology because the fear is Apple and Google and the tech companies will put them out of business. And the traditional car makers?
For all their knowledge and history and brand, they could actually stop being the people that you get cars from. This is what happened to Nokia, Motorola in the phone space.
Smartphones happened, and now Nokia's history. So when might all this start happening? Wendy Ju predicts we'll start to see autonomous vehicles transporting things other than humans pretty soon for package delivery. Then we'll see them in select locations. For example,
It would be really easy for people who live in a retirement village to have self-driving golf carts because they move at low speeds, usually are in places with good weather, and are really constrained environments.
so she expects to see that in the next 5 years. As for a total transition to a time when driving your own car is banned,
I think it'll be like 40, 50 years before that happens.
50 years is not that long. But in the meantime, while those fully driverless cars are deployed for special uses, Ju predicts we'll see regular consumer passenger cars become more and more automated. Imagine more tricked out cruise control, but always with a human driver who can take over.
We're not ready to have self-driving cars where there's not a person to fall back on. I think we're probably 5 years away from something that everyone would feel comfortable with. When we'll actually make it permissible, I don't know.
There are a lot of negotiations that'll have to be made. For example, Wendy Ju says one of the first things everyone asks their autonomous car to do is break the law.
I feel like it's less that they want to speed and they want to make sure it's their car. Like if the car is driving fast because I asked it to, then you know it's my car. But if the car tells me that that is faster than the speed limit, then it's the state's car or the manufacturer's car.
There won't be a moment when driverless cars are perfected, determined safe and ready for the road. But right now, 33,000 people are already killed every year from car crashes in this country. That risk didn't stop us from paving the freeways. Dangerous roads have never stopped us from finding out where they lead. For Philosophy Talk, I'm Liza Veal.
That was an awesome piece, Liza. Thanks for that. I'm Ken Taylor, along with Philosophy Talk's Director of Research, Laura McGuire. We're coming to you from Cubberley Auditorium on the Stanford campus.
Our guest today is a professor of psychology at Harvard University. He's author of Moral Tribes, Emotion, Reason, and the Gap Between Us and Them, and more recently, our Driverless Dilemma, When Should Your Car Be Willing to Kill You? Please welcome to the Philosophy Talk stage, Joshua Greene.
Josh, you're a philosopher turned psychologist. I don't think of the morality of driverless cars as a topic at the forefront of psychological research, so I wonder what first piqued your interest in this topic?
Well, I'm a longtime trolleyologist, which means that I study moral dilemmas in which public transportation emergencies threaten people's lives if you don't do something quick. And then I became one of the first neurotrolleyologists, and so it just makes sense that I would become a computational trolleyologist.
Covering all the trolleyologist bases. Huh?
Josh, so we humans are fairly lousy drivers, and it can see why these driverless cars are going to improve safety, but we like to think of ourselves as decent moral agents at least. So how happy do you think we're going to be to turn over these moral decisions to the autonomous vehicles?
Well, I don't think humans are ever going to be completely happy about anything because there are always trade-offs, and the grass will always seem greener on the other side. But I think that the key lies in what you said. That is, there are going to be enormous gains in safety at some point as a result of having machines that drive better than people. But then once you've got the machines driving, there's no way to avoid the kind of moral trade-offs that are inevitable in the kinds of decisions that drivers, human or otherwise, make.
So you sell this on the basis of safety. It's going to help old people, going to increase their mobility. It's going to help the environment, all that sort of stuff. And I know how engineers think they can eliminate the hard problems, right, or push them down to a small. But I don't know that I would trust my life to a computer. Is that just me?
Well,
I just trust my life to a computer.
When you're flying an airplane, you trust your life to a computer.
But there's a pilot there.
Yeah, but it's the machine that's mostly in charge, at least a lot of the time.
So you say we trust our lives to computers all the time?
I mean, I think that, humans are naturally skeptical, but we also learn. And if the machines do a good job, then we'll be happy with them, more or less, and consider them safe. So there'll be the early adopters who are fearless, and then they'll tell their friends and say, oh, I've done it dozens of times, it's no problem. And you'll try it once, and it's fine. And, just as more people learn to trust, even more will learn to trust.
What do you think will be the biggest ethical challenges that we're going to be facing as we're developing this technology?
Well, I think the biggest ethical question is actually how soon do we adopt? Because it may well be the case that lives would be saved as a result of adopting driverless technology before it's perfected and before a lot of accidents are eliminated. And so we may find ourselves in a zone where we don't feel comfortable with it, but it actually would be good for us from a safety perspective. And that may be the biggest challenge. But in terms of the driving itself, there are other issues which are interesting.
This is Philosophy Talk, coming to you from Cubberley Auditorium on the Stanford campus. Our guest is Harvard psychologist Joshua Greene.
In our next segment, we'll ask whether it's even possible to reduce morality to computer algorithms. What values would you want programmed into them? And what should a car do when those values conflict with one another?
Computing moral conundrums, along with questions from our very human audience, when Philosophy Talk continues.
Thanks to our musical guests, the Tiffany Austin Trio. This is Philosophy Talk. I'm Laura McGuire, sitting in for John Perry.
And I'm Ken Taylor, sitting in for Ken Taylor. And our guest is Harvard psychologist, Harvard philosopher turned psychologist, Joshua Greene. And we're thinking about driverless cars at the moral crossroads.
Is it really possible to mechanize morality? What would it take for you to be comfortable trusting your life to a computer? Join the discussion by stepping up to one of the microphones on either side of the stage.
Joshua, look, I really don't have any doubt that you can program a computer to navigate a car better than a human could, more efficiently, more in tune with road conditions, seeing further down the road, not to mention more in tune with the law, okay? But there do come moments when drivers have to make morally fraught decisions. Right? And I don't know exactly how we do that, but I don't know why we should believe that computers could do that better than we humans. I think AI can do lots of things, but it's going to take over moral decision making?
Well, so a lot of us have the tendency to think of moral decision making as some kind of special thing that's not mechanical. But from a neuroscientific perspective, everything that we do is mechanical. It's all computation taking place with the neurons in our brains. So if you believe that the brain is ultimately a biological machine and the brain implements moral thinking, then it's just a question of when machines get to the point that they can do the same thing.
Look, I'm a materialist. Mm-hmm. I believe consciousness and rationality and language are just properties of the mind, brain, and that's all in the wetware, organized in a certain way.
Right.
I got all that.
Okay.
But I think our understanding of exactly what the brain is doing, pretty early days. Mm-hmm.
I mean,
that's one thing.
Yeah.
And secondly, there are tons of moral theories out there,
mm-hmm.
right? I mean, I have colleagues who spend their whole life defending this or that moral theory against that charge. So,
it isn't also part of the problem that we learn by examples. We don't have algorithms, and in a split decision, we have to make a judgment. And the problem with having an algorithm is that all of this needs to be worked out in advance in a way that's not how we humans do it.
Well, so, we talk about sometimes, people talk about programming self-driving cars, but they're partially programmed but partially trained, right?
Okay.
So it's not simply a matter of someone writes out the right ethical theory and then you tell the car what to do. To a large extent, it's going to be a matter of, we like what the car did there, do more of that. We don't like what the car did there, do less of that. So the theory, in some sense, can be in our head, and by telling the car in a computer-appropriate way what was good and what was bad.
You're thinking of like a trained-up neural net or something like that.
Yeah.
But look, when you say we tell the car
right.
what to do, who's the we? Because people are really divided. right? And not only are people really divided over like their moral intuitions and all that sort of stuff, their stakes in this issue are really different. The insurance companies have a set of stakes. The automobile manufacturers have a set of stakes. I, as a potential passenger, I mean, this thing about that Laura said, I was deadly serious, train it to be utilitarian. I don't want to be carted around by a utilitarian, right? I want a partialist, you know, a non.
But you want me to be carted around by a utilitarian.
Yes, I want you to be carted around by a utilitarian. So we're all over the place. So how are we just going to, like, snap our fingers, regulate this into cars, and it's all going to be hunky-dory? That's a fantasy.
Yeah, well, I know I didn't say anything about hunky-dory, but I think it's important to separate two different issues. One is the first question you asked, which is, can you get the car to make something look like recognizably moral decisions? And that's a technical problem, and I think it'll be solved eventually. And then there's the moral question, which I think you're absolutely right, is not avoidable. Whether we're training the car like a neural net or programming the car like a classical programming, either way, I think we can't escape making value judgments. And that's part of why this is an interesting issue.
Well, but it's not presented to us. I mean, I love technology, right? But we get technology presented to us as some kind of technical fix. There's this massive safety problem. We got this technology. But wait a minute, it's the people deploying the technology. And in this case, the technology is going to be a moral agent, right? Who do you hold responsible in this new regime when a driverless car does something terrible? I know the engineers are going to perfect these things, and they're never going to do anything terrible, Clay. They're never going to do anything terrible. But who do you hold responsible when they go off the rails?
Yeah, I mean, my guess is that it's really going to depend on how and to what extent these things are regulated. If there's a set of standards, my guess is that at the very least, the individuals riding the cars are not going to be held responsible. If you have a choice, let's say you can go out and buy a selfish jerk car that protects its passengers at the expense of other people, well, then, that choice is either maybe reflected in your liability, or you're going to pay higher premiums for your insurance if you're riding in a car that you chose to place your interests ahead of the interests of others who are around.
So you mentioned that if you think about the system that you want to be in place, we think, well, cars should be utilitarian, but when then you ask someone, what car would you be willing to get into? Their view changes. I'm wondering, what would you say, what would you predict about human psychology depending on whether it was regulated in that way, or whether whether the consumer chooses it, whether it's just the lawmakers decide that this is best overall? Is there a difference in how we would feel, do you think, about that?
Well, in fact, we already have some data on this. So there was a really nice paper published last year by Jean-Francois Bonnefond and colleagues, basically putting this question about the car protecting the driver versus protecting the interests of pedestrians, and asked people the same question two different ways. How do you think the cars should be, or what's a better way for them to be, and what kind of car would you want to own or ride in? And following, I think, your intuition, people were more comfortable with utilitarian cars that value all lives equally, when it's put forth as a policy proposal or just as a general idea, than they are when they actually think about it for themselves, and even more so when they think about it for themselves and their family riding alongside. So there's a kind of gap there between what's good overall and what's good for me, or at least what I'm willing to put up with.
And do you think that this will change? Will people's minds change as we get more used to this technology? Do you think we might start off not so comfortable with the utilitarian model for our own personal vehicle, but then might shift later on? Is that possible?
I think that's right. I think we learn from experience. And
that's Pollyannish. I think, and I think the authors think it's a deep dilemma, right? Because if you look at it from like the third-person policymaker's point of view, there's a lot of I'm not in general utilitarian, but if you look at it as the social planner's point of view, right? Then the social planner would say, all these are all my citizens, all my children, all their lives are equal, right? If you look at it from the first person, I've got to make a decision about what I'm going to do about. It's a really different calculation, because I don't adopt the third person social planner's point of view. Maybe you think I should. I mean, that's what Peter Singer thinks. Right. But there's a lot of argument about that. So if you look at it, And that's a really hard question, right? This sort of third-person social planner point of view, and the consumer or the would-be passenger saying, which of these cars am I going to get into? If you were to respond to that?
I think you're right. I think if people have a choice at the individual level, they will choose to protect themselves and their families. So the question is whether we will choose collectively to take away that choice. And I could see it going either way. It's a continuum between all about me and the other riders and greater good. And my guess is that we're not going to be all the way at either extreme, but I wouldn't be surprised if we end up, or maybe the Swedes at least end up, closer to the greater good.
You're listening to Philosophy Talk. We're at Cubberley Auditorium on the Stanford campus talking with Joshua Greene about driverless cars at the moral crossroads. And we got a lot of questions from that live audience, and welcome to Philosophy Talk, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Fania, and I'm from Aptos. Is the intelligence computers need to drive a car equivalent to passing the Turing test? And if so, what makes you think driverless cars are right around the corner? And if not, what makes you think driving is a bounded problem?
So that's for
you. I don't think that cars will have to be able to pass the Turing test in order to drive reasonably well. Although there are some people who do worry that to really get all of the social stuff, I'm starting to go, are you going to let me go, that they might have to be a lot smarter and especially socially smarter than you think. But there's a kind of more narrow intelligence, I would guess, that cars can have and do a pretty good job. And when I say a pretty good job, I just mean better than people, which is not that high a bar.
I would assume it's much more complicated if you have driverless cars and human-driven cars, right? The problem about the subtle cues and all that is reading each other's minds.
Yeah,
the thing that humans could do. You take the humans out of the picture and let the cars communicate. I mean, I can imagine the cars signaling each other all kinds of information.
Yeah.
You put a lot of processing power in this thing. And, right. So
you don't even need traffic lights. They just
exactly.
Right. Yeah.
The problem will be, though, before we have gotten to that stage, there'll be the period of integration where you'll have autonomous vehicles and human-driven vehicles on the road, and they're going to behave differently, presumably, and that could lead to a lot of dangerous situations.
Yeah. I mean, you could imagine having a mixed situation, right, where you have certain zones where it's all automatic cars, and then other zones where humans are allowed. And then what you might find is that when it's all
no humans allowed,
when it's all self-driving cars, it's safer and it goes faster. And so for most people's transportation needs, they tend to want to go in the faster, safer self-driving car zone. And then that zone gets bigger, the other zone gets smaller, and next thing you know, it's a recreational vehicle situation where people, drive their own cars the way they drive snowmobiles today.
Welcome to Philosophy Talk, sir.
Thank you. My name is Carl. I'm an emeritus professor of computer science. Tragically today, tens of thousands of people die in automobile crashes, which we don't completely understand, so we tend to blame it on the humans. These computer crashes, when they happen, will be extremely well instrumented, so we will know exactly how the computer killed these people. What will the media make of dozens of crashes where we know exactly how the computer killed the people?
They'll blame it on Hillary Clinton.
Well, baby. Do you have a serious answer to that question, or is that your serious answer?
That's half serious. I mean, I think it's an interesting question. Is that we tend to be forgiving when it comes to the humans because it was a tough question. Is in the moment I didn't have time to think. Right. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out, and it'll depend on how good the technology is when it's widely deployed. If it's happening all the time, people might really get fed up, even if the rates of injury or death are lower than they are with humans. If they debut really well, then I'm guessing we'll be more forgiving. But you're right, knowing, whenever something goes wrong, if you can go in and say, this is exactly what the algorithm did and why it did it, that's going to put pressure on the people who designed it, and there's going to be no way to sort of come away looking perfect.
Welcome to Philosophy Talk, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Catherine. I am a first-year law student at Stanford. My question relates to consent and how much information should be available both to the purchasers of these driverless cars and to the pedestrians and to fellow car drivers on the road as well.
So for example, if you have, let's say there's variation in how different cars make the trade-off between protecting mine and protecting what's out there, you have them color-coded, so the red cars are the ones that really, protect themselves. And say, do you want to have something like that? Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. And in fact, I think if you gave people a choice, but you wanted to encourage people to make the socially optimal decision, then maybe what you do is make it very public, so everybody knows that you're choosing to drive a car that's putting me ahead of us. It's kind of like the opposite of the Prius effect.
Wouldn't that be like? Wouldn't the thing be to have the cars? Like, I don't know why the cars can't broadcast to each other. Right. I mean, if your car broadcasts to my car, its strategy, its driving strategy,
right,
then it could make an optimal adjustment based on, right?
Yeah.
I want to ask you about the trolley problem. So you said in the beginning you're a trolleyologist. Did I say that right?
Was that a trolleyologist?
Trolleyologist?
I think the usual is trolleyologist, but there are many variations.
So I know you've done psychological research on this, and part of what you're doing is giving different scenarios and adjusting them slightly to kind of pinpoint what it is that people are really responding to when they say this is morally acceptable and that's not.
Right.
So how does that research fit in with this issue of autonomous vehicles? Are there any distinctions that you came across in your research that are particularly relevant for the driverless car case?
Yeah, well, I think there are a few. I mean, so one thing, related to a question that was asked about we're going to be able to do a post-mortem and actually look and see how the car made the decision. If the car acted the way it was supposed to act, then everything is going to look intentional in some sense, right? That the car knew there was some probability that this person would be killed and this probability, and decided to do one thing rather than the other. And so there's a record of a kind of conscious choice. Whereas if, let's say, you see some obstacle up ahead and you steer out of the way and then you happen to run into somebody, it is truly an accident. I mean, it might be completely unforeseen or only foreseeable at a very late point. And so one of these distinctions that has a long history in philosophy, going back to Aquinas, the doctrine of double effect, which is really the doctrine of side effect, which basically says if you harm somebody as a side effect, that's not as bad as if you are harming them as part of your plan. Not that you necessarily want them to be hurt, but that you choose to make the sacrifice in order to achieve a greater good. And so I think one of the thoughts behind that question that was asked before is, isn't this going to be tricky? Because what would have been a side effect if it was a human, or a complete accident if it's a human, is going to look like a chosen sacrifice from the point of view of the cars. And I think that psychological distinction is very salient, even if it doesn't change the body count.
You're listening to Philosophy Talk. We're thinking about driverless cars at the moral crossroads with Joshua Greene from Harvard University.
Imagine life in a world in which increasingly intelligent robots and computers have supplanted more and more human labor. What work would still be left for humans? How would we spend our time? Would it be a liberating utopia or an oppressive dystopia?
We're coming to you from Cubberley Auditorium on the Stanford campus. We'll take more questions from our autonomous audience when Philosophy Talk continues.
Dashing along, stay at 10, and 2 it won't be very long, won't be very long, won't be very long.
Thank you to our live musical guests, the Tiffany Austin Trio. I'm Laura McGuire, sitting in for John Perry. This is Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything.
Except your intelligence. I'm Ken Taylor. We're thinking about driverless cars at the moral crossroads with Joshua Greene from Harvard University. We've got a lot of questions. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, sir.
Hi, my name's Chuan Jung. I'm from Auckland, New Zealand. We've touched on this idea several times of sort of allowing the moral theory of our driverless cars to be customized by consumers. What I'm wondering is, in terms of as far as morality goes, is that the answer? Does that sort of help us sidestep the conundrum by transforming it to what is now effectively an engineering or game theory problem, or does it just sort of raise new potential moral objections to the very idea of allowing the moral theory of cars to be customizable?
I was only joking when I said that. I don't think you could actually do that. I think that would be a disaster. I don't think it would work. Because this is a massive coordination problem, and that would make it a non-coordination problem. Right? So I think it has to be centrally regulated. But it has to be centrally regulated in a democratic society, so you can't get rid of the fact that we got to debate this and somehow settle this. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think it's a really important point, because I've heard several very smart people on the scientific side, journalists as well, say, oh, just let the cars figure it out. We don't have to have a theory of how this ought to be done. Cars are better at solving these kinds of problems than we are. And I think this is a kind of confusion, because it's true that machine learning especially allows us to figure out, or have the machine figure out how to do something that we don't know how to do ourselves. But you still have to know what outcome you want. So if you're training a neural network to tell the difference between male faces and female faces, it may figure out how to do it in a way that you couldn't program in, but you still have to say, that's a male face and that's a female face, and you have to do the equivalent with a self-driving car. So there's no way to avoid the question,
you have
as
to
you
do
said.
a kind of a reflective equilibrium kind of thing, but we have to do the reflective equilibrium.
That's right. You know, the question will always remain open. Whatever we decide to do, even if we all come to some kind of an agreement, we can still ask, is this just our agreement, or is this the objective moral truth? I don't think that meta-ethical question is going to go away. But I think that one thing, and maybe this was part of the thought behind your question, is that you can't be vague here. That is, you know, one of the advantages of utilitarianism as a moral theory is that it's not vague. I mean, it requires input in terms of information about what is likely to cause what, but it's clear on where it stands. Whereas a lot of other moral theories aren't so much moral theories as sort of sketches of a flavor of what a moral theory might be like, but there are details that remain to be filled in about what would actually be done. And if you want to have a Kantian car or an Aristotelian car, you have to actually get down to brass tacks and say, how is that going to be applied in a way where you can take in the information about the situation you're in and output a moral answer?
But okay, tell me if you think this is at all realistic. This is something that Laura pretended to believe in the opening. But, I mean, there is a kind of engineering perspective that you could think, look, we know what we want. We want cars to get there safely, efficiently, with a minimum of death and destruction and all that sort of stuff, and cheaply, and all this, right?
Right.
In one way, that's an engineering problem. There are a set of constraints that you want the car to satisfy.
Yeah.
I mean, is it not possible that you could engineer the moral conundrums kind of out of the thing? Because if people just like obeyed the law or coordinated or gave each other eye signals, they wouldn't have to face these. It's like, why are there so many accidents? Because there's a kind of looming effect for a human being. This looms large, but it looms large too early, right? Too late, and it puts on the brakes. Well, the computer will sense that many seconds earlier.
You're gonna always have to prioritize, though, right?
Well, but
I mean, you can't eliminate that completely.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. How much could you eliminate so that these only became problems at the margin? Well, I mean, I think that's what an engineer would say to us.
I
I'm
think,
going to make
and
these
that
problems
is,
at the margin.
I've heard people in the industry talk about this, and this is always their line. And it's not that there isn't a lot of truth to it, but you know, it reminds me, this is where part of my experience as a trolleyologist comes in, because I pose these dilemmas to people, and they will do everything they can to get out of the dilemma.
Right.
They will say that, you know, you can jump yourself in front of the trolley instead of pushing that guy in front of the trolley. Maybe there's a third track.
I always wonder about that. Why isn't that given an option?
Right, exactly. See, but this is a version of that. This is basically saying, I'm going to make this problem go away with technology. And there's something right about that, which is to say, you can probably make a lot of the problem go away with technology. But I don't think you can ever make it go away completely. And so to make this more concrete, how close are you willing to get to a cyclist?
Yeah.
You can't avoid answering that question, right? How aggressive are you willing to be when making a left turn when there's no traffic light? There's no way to avoid answering that question, right? We don't think of those as moral questions, but those are questions that have moral consequences. So I don't think there's any way around at least facing, as you said, the trade-offs within a probabilistic framework. It doesn't mean you're going to get these stark trade-offs where if you do this, you know these people are going to die and these people aren't, but making it probabilistic and finding the happy third alternatives doesn't make the moral question of trade-offs completely disappear.
So you, in the trolley cases as they're presented, you know the outcomes, right? It's either 5 people will die or 1 person will die, and you get to choose. But
Right.
that's not what it's like in the real world. You
Right.
don't know the outcomes, so
Right.
there's a lot of uncertainty. So
Right.
how does that factor in the uncertainty of outcomes?
Well, I think it makes it a lot more complicated from an engineering perspective, but it doesn't eliminate, as I said, the need to make some kind of an evaluative trade-off, right? So if the car estimates that it has such and such small but non-zero percentage of having a collision with that cyclist over there if you do this, and it has such and such small but non-zero percentage of going off the road and into the ravine, right? You still have to make the choices about those trade-offs, even if you don't know what's going to happen. So it makes it technically and computationally more complicated, but the underlying value trade-offs, I think, are there just as much as they would be in those stylized cases where you know exactly what's going to happen.
Welcome to Philosophy Talk, sir.
Hi, I'm Shahab from Redwood City, California. So today we let individual drivers make this decision, make this moral decision at a split second, which most probably, we humans screw up and get everyone killed. Yeah. So what's wrong with having profiles of the drivers, basically asking them the question beforehand and then just, do whatever they programmed in their profile.
Right. Well, I mean, to some extent, we already have something like that when it comes to insurance, right? So your insurance company profiles you and says, hey, how many accidents have you had? Hey, did you get good grades? And things like that. But you're right. This could be taken to a much higher degree with all of these variables tracked, and presumably there will be some impetus to do that, especially if insurance is a stakeholder.
Welcome to Philosophy Talk, man.
Hi, my name's Melody. I'm a lawyer. And I'm curious, we grapple with these questions in other areas, right? With products liability in general about risk trade-offs and product design and anticipated results. Yeah. But also individuals versus systems in places like healthcare and drugs, and where people do value their own safety or their loved one's safety over the efficiencies or other ideas. And so I'm curious, do you think autonomous is different, or do you think there's something we can learn from grappling with those problems in other areas?
As you said, I think it shares certain features in common with these other cases, but there are always features that are unique for each one of these policy questions. A really interesting one is organ donation, and in particular whether or not you have an opt-in versus an opt-out system. So in the United States, you have to opt in. You have to say, I'm willing to be in the organ donation registry. In many European countries, that's not the case, and they have much less of an organ shortage, so they get that social benefit. Some countries are willing to go that route and others are not, and the fear is, well, I don't want anyone getting ready to take my organs before their time, and I don't want to take that risk. So I think we can look to other social dilemmas like this and learn a few things. One is that there's similar trade-offs. Two is that different nations have gone in different directions, and often not for sort of obvious reasons, that there may be sort of an element of sort of just path dependence in terms of which ones go which way or not.
Welcome to Philosophy Talk, sir.
Hi, my name is Greg. I'm a student here from the Philadelphia area, and my question is, how do you see difference in moral system impacting drivers from a socioeconomic perspective? Will higher income consumers get preference to more selfish vehicles? Yeah. And what about lower income consumers?
Right. So I don't know if this is what you had in mind, but there was a case last year when an executive from Mercedes-Benz was talking about their plans for self-driving cars and said something that suggested that their plan was to put their passengers first ahead of other people. And then there was a bit of possibly backpedaling where the executive said, no, I don't mean that we're valuing our people more. I just mean that we're more certain that you can save the life of the person who's inside. And and it's like, well, what do you mean? Like if the car's headed right towards a pedestrian? But that was at least how they spun it. And you can judge for yourself what he originally meant. But absolutely, I think that if you allow people in some way to buy more safety for themselves, right? Then you can end up with that situation. But in some sense, we already have that, right? That you can buy a big SUV that is, or may be, or you may think it is, safer for you, definitely not less safe for other people, right? So we have a situation like that now, and maybe that's something that we should be regulating more, and certainly something that we could be thinking about when it comes to how the car drives as opposed to sort of how the car is structured.
So, Josh, this has been a fascinating conversation. There's more that we could talk about. There are all kinds of questions we didn't even
get to them at all.
Yeah, we didn't get to, but I got to thank you for joining us.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. This is great.
Thank you.
Our guest has been Joshua Greene. He's a professor of psychology at Harvard University. He's author of Our Driverless Dilemma. When should your car be willing to kill you? This conversation continues at Philosopher's Corner at our online community of thinkers, where our motto is Cogito ergo blogo. I think, therefore I blog. And you too can become a partner in that community just by visiting our website, philosophytalk.org.
Now, let's hear from someone who'd speed through any crossroads. It's Ian Scholes, the 60-second philosopher.
Ian Scholes. Driverless cars may seem like a sweet dream for Google, but did they do a Google search to see if car driving America itself thought it was a good idea? The original idea of the factory-made, store-bought automobile was autonomy. Go where you want, they call it the open road, let's go to the beach, let's drive to Disneyland, let's drive across America with Jack Kerouac. A driverless car would be nice for a commute, I guess. Robot drives you, drops you off. You can take selfies of yourself reading the Wall Street Journal in the back seat. But if everybody's doing this, how will it improve traffic? It might make it worse. Everybody's got his own private little limousine. If you're going to share the ride like a carpool, what's the point? It's like taking a commuter van. You might as well take the train. At least there you can walk around, go to the club car, have a cocktail or a coffee. If the driverless car really catches on, I see many, many problems. What if you have special needs? You need help getting into the car. What will the robot driver do? What if you travel with a dog? Or you're a smoker? Or the previous passenger threw up in the seat? Is there a robot to clean things up? Maybe outlaw drinking or eating. There goes the coffee-to-go market. If everybody's suddenly pushing driverless cars, budgets for public transit will shrink, and it won't be cheaper than a bus to ride in driverless cars. There won't be room for buses with all the driverless cars in the way. Poor people will be screwed again. Plus, you'll need a smartphone and a credit card to ride, right? This will probably mean more factory closings because driverless cars will last longer, fewer accidents, and only driverless car-sharing companies will be buying cars. Would you buy one for yourself? What would be the point? It's like streaming a movie versus owning a DVD. Why pay for a garage that is a DVD player? Why worry about insurance? The robot's driving, let the robot pay. Also, since driverless cars are safer, we won't have speeding tickets, parking tickets, less income for cities and counties and states. How would this work if you're going to grandma's? Plug in the trip and go, I guess. But what if you see a garage sale on the way? Do you yell at the program to pull over? What if you see something up the highway you want to see? Do you tell the car to make a U-turn? Do you have to punch in the information? That will be death to antique sales, my friends, and bankruptcy for roadside attractions. What if the bridge is out? How will the car know? Will we pay for infrastructure repairs so the mapping will be up to date and accurate everywhere? Will it be like Google Maps? Who will monitor that? Who will program the cars? Why is this any different really from a taxi, except you don't have to pay a driver? That's the idea, I guess. Capitalism hates labor. But what about limo drivers, truck drivers, race car drivers, RV drivers, car lovers, collectors, stunt car drivers for the movies, Uber drivers? Where will they drive? Will they be shunned by the highly judgmental passenger community? Oh, and no more parking garages. I forgot that part. Many tech innovators think that all this innovation will free up human beings for what? Doing watercolors, ballroom dancing, writing a novel, sitting in the backseat creating abstract art while cars mill about aimlessly? One thing I can guarantee you, the space freed by non-existent parking garages, by tort lawyer offices, by DMV offices will not be filled up with symphony halls, museums, or even dance collective performance spaces. I'm betting more storage. Skyscrapers full of storage lockers and servers. This is the golden age of storage, my friends. Anyway, I say skip the driverless car and go back to what you said you'd give us, future. Flying cars. You promised. Where are they? Probably all got shot down by drones. We never think these things through, do we? I gotta go.
Holding hands at midnight 'neath the starry sky. Nice work if you can get it, and you can get it if you try. Strolling with the one girl, sighing shy after sigh. Nice work if you can get it, and you can get it if you try.
Philosophy Talk is a presentation of KALW Local Public Radio and the trustees of Leland Stanford Junior University. Copyright 2017.
Our executive producers are David Demarest and Matt Martin. Special thanks to Stanford Symbolic Systems Program and the McCoy Center for Ethics in Society.
Thanks also to Todd Davies, Momo Keem, Dan Brandon, Conchita Perales, and to our musical guests, Ron Belcher on bass, Adam Schulman on piano, and Tiffany Austin on vocals.
The senior producer of Philosophy Talk is Devin Strolovich. Laura McGuire is our director of research. Our marketing director is Cindy Prince-Baum.
Support for Philosophy Talk comes from the various groups at Stanford University and the partners at our online community of thinkers.
Now, the views expressed or misexpressed in this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of Stanford University or of our other funders.
Not even when they're true and reasonable. The conversation continues on our website, philosophytalk.org, where you too can become a partner in our community of thinkers. I'm Laura McGuire.
And I'm Ken Taylor. Thank you for listening.
And thank you for thinking.
Nice work if you can get it, and if you get it,